At Granger, we're for the ones who pay attention to every little detail. The ones who fuss, tinker, and sweat the small stuff. Because you know the tiniest thing can make the biggest difference when it comes to keeping business moving. We get it. We're the same way. Offering access to product experts to help you quickly and easily find what you need. So whatever your industry, you know you're always getting professional-grade products. Call, click Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast with the spotlight on section hikers.
And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Welcome to the podcast, everybody. You are listening to Jester Section Hiker, the premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers. And I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart. Before I introduce my guest for this week's episode, I wanted to say a huge thank you to a couple of listeners, Friday and Cliff, who both sent me some amazing gifts in the mail recently. Thank you for your generosity and for listening to the podcast. Sending me a gift is truly not necessary, but much appreciated. Thank you both. For my guest this week, I chat with an individual that in my eyes is the ultimate definition of a section hiker. I believe after hearing from her, you all will think the same. I tried to figure out the best way to introduce her to you all and decided why not share with you from her own written bio. I have been a lot of places and done a lot of things. After all, I am 79 years old. Besides turning my hand to the writing of my hiking adventures and completing the Triple Crown, I have been in the Peace Corps, a physical therapist with a specialty in pediatrics, an Army wife, a pastor of a church for 16 years, a gardener, and now retired. I am the mother of 2 and a grandmother of 10, also known as the outdoor grandma. In my spare time, I preach and play the cornet. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of the podcast. And now on to my interview with my guest, Mary Davison. All right, you guys, I am back and I am really pumped and excited for this episode. My guest today completed the Triple Crown at age 76. And what that means is she completed the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail, and even better, all as a section hiker. And one of the main unique things about this is she started this adventure at age 60. So please welcome with me to the podcast, Mary Davison, or also known in the hiking community as Medicare Pastor.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
You guys, we're going to do a little stats, and then I'm going to bring up a topic that Mary and I were talking about just before we hit the record button. And because of this, she and I are best friends now. So, but before we get into that, I want to make sure I get this right. So, Mary, you started the Pacific Crest Trail in 2003 and finished in 2012, correct?
I believe that is correct. It's whatever my book has the dates down now.
Well, I got this from your book.
So I don't forget them now.
And then, okay, so you started the PCT in 2003 and completed in 2012. And then you started simultaneously, so to speak, the Appalachian Trail in 2004 and finished in 2011. And then after you finished those two, kind of working on those together, you started the Continental Divide Trail in 2012 and finished in 2017. So since you put it in the book, I'm assuming that's correct, right?
Yes. I looked it all up very carefully so that everything was correct in the book.
And one of the things we're going to talk about, so Mary, you've written 2 books. The first one
Yes.
we're going to talk about is called Old Lady on the Trail, Triple Crown at 76. And the second one we're going to talk about is called Aren't You Afraid? And one of the first things in your first book, Old Lady on the Trail, that I found fascinating, and you started this endeavor at 60, is in one of the first few pages you said you didn't know who to blame this on, your parents, the Girl Scouts, or the Wonderland Trail. So getting started on all this. So kind of break that down for us.
Well, I put it that way in the book because those were all part of how I came to be me and came to love the out of doors. My parents camped. We camped. And actually, way back then, it didn't seem unusual to me, at least as a kid, that we would go on trips either from Colorado back east or from Colorado to California. And we would never stay at a motel. We would camp. And in those days, you could actually kind of just drive down the road and find a place and sort of camp. There were beginning to be parks and things, but we didn't always necessarily look for those.
So that would be the blame it on the parents part,
That's
right?
the blame it on the parents. I learned how to camp growing up. It was just part of what we did.
And then I'm assuming the Girl Scouts came along.
Yes, they did. And more importantly than just the Girl Scouts, although that was the first step, was Girl Scout camp. And I absolutely fell in love and adored the first time I went. And after going once, pretty much everything was immaterial in my life except for the time that I could go to Girl Scout camp again every year.
Is there one particular thing that was very special and near and dear to you that called you back to continue to go to Girl Scout camp?
It was the whole flavor of it. We sang all the time. We hiked, we camped, we improved all of my camping skills. There were horses to ride. I just learned lots and lots of things. And I met people who loved to do the same things I love to do. So it was all just wonderful. I loved it.
It was building that community, as you
Yes.
said before, way back then. Okay, so in that time frame, you blame your parents, you blame the Girl Scouts and the Girl Scout camp. So what age did you hike the Wonderland Trail before 60?
Yeah, I'm going to be fuzzy on details here now. When I moved to Washington State, and I don't remember when that was without looking it up, but Washington State is a beautiful place, and Mount Rainier is pretty handy. And we would go on hikes. And so I had hiked some of the Wonderland Trail in bits and pieces, but I had never hiked the Wonderland Trail altogether until the year I turned 60. And I told my daughter, who she was my kid who really liked to hike. And I told her, well, we ought to do this before I get too old to hike. And so little did I know that was going to be the start of an enormous amount of hiking, long distance hiking. But we did the Wonderland Trail, and I'm a retired pastor now. I was leading a church at that time, and I combined some church hike with it. So it was a big logistical feat of anywhere from 3 to 11 people on various parts of that trail, which all had to have reserved campsites in the backcountry. So I organized fairly well. So it all worked. It was wonderful. We had a great time. We had a blast. We took forever. We took lots longer than most people do on the Wonderland Trail. We just, we had a wonderful time. And when we were done, she and I looked at each other and we said, oh, we're done. It was very sad. So look for some other things
Mary
to
and I
do.
are looking at each other, and I'm like, and Mary had the saddest, look on her face, like, "Oh no, this endeavor's over. Now what do we do?" kind of thing. So
yes.
So the Wonderland Trail kind of led to, I'm assuming, this seeking more hiking on.
Yes.
long distance trails and leading your way to the PCT and the AT. But first, I want to go over, where did this trail name come from, Medicare pastor?
Well, actually, I chose it. And so a purist would say, oh, you shouldn't do that. To which I would say, I don't care. And the first time I was on the Appalachian Trail, I came across trail names, which to me were very reminiscent of camp names, actually. And I thought, well, what should mine be? And I played around with it for a year or so, I think. And then I thought, well, I'm about to retire, so Medicare. And the funny part is that younger hikers don't get that. So I'll say, in case there's younger hikers around, that's everybody over, 60 something or other.
I guess 65. I don't know.
That's our old age insurance.
Right?
Our old age insurance in the United States. So the fact that I said Medicare means I'm old. And I kept the pastor because I don't know, women of my vintage who became pastors, it wasn't an easy task. And it's part of who I am. So I thought, okay, this just means old lady retired pastor. So Medicare pastor.
I love it. I think it's perfect. It's one of the best names I've heard, I think, because as you and I are talking, it truly defines who you are. And I think it's A-okay you were not named on the trail. I think that's just a thing.
Yes, I tell people when they ask me about trail names, I say, well, you can let your name comes from something on the trail, or you can choose your own. But realize that although you can turn it down, you might end up being called something like Big Mutt or something you might not really prefer for all the time of the rest of your life. So, anyway, I chose mine.
Perfect. So let's get into this short little conversation you and I had before we started recording. So a couple of days ago, Mary and I were emailing back and forth, and I said, hey, do you mind sending me a couple pictures for the show notes and for promoting the podcast? And, a couple days later or whatever, Mary sent me a couple pictures and I opened them up and I was like, okay, this in particular picture, this lady is bad to the bone, and I don't even need to meet her. I could tell by the stature of you in this picture. I could tell by what you have on. And I'm like, if this 60-something-year-old bad to the bone hiker can hike around in her hiking sports bra, there is nothing that any of us can complain about. So as you guys hear this, you'll see her picture in the show notes and for the promotional picture for the promotional material. But Mary, you told me that, hey, that was no big deal. You were hiking in your sports bra even before it was called a sports bra, right?
Yes. So
school us on sports bra, Mary, okay?
Long ago in the Girl Scouts, at Girl Scout camp, when I was like 4th grade, maybe, we would go on hikes from that camp. And you know what? We hiked in our bras. Though we were led by our leaders who hiked in their bras. Everybody hiked in their bras. Sports bras came along, and my goodness, they're in colors. To me, they're just clothes. So,
well, Mary, when I saw that picture, I automatically started assessing myself and saying, "Oh my God, I have got to get in shape. I got to be able to hike in my sports bra." So there you go. So thank you, Mary.
It's cooler.
You got that right.
I like it.
So, all right, let's get into this book, Old Lady on the Trail, Triple Crown at 76. And I hate to keep going back, but you and I had a conversation probably 2 months ago about this book. And I wanted to read the books, both of your books, before I interviewed you. And you made a comment to me that the first book, people got confused by your writing. And I was like, I wonder what that's about. And you told me the second book you thought was better written. So I'm going to dispel that myth right here. And a lot of people that listen to this, and Mary is smiling right now, we are section hikers. And this podcast is geared towards section hikers. So your book, written from a section hiker perspective, makes total 100% to me. And if you guys order this book and get this book from Mary, I'm telling you right now, there are so many quotes and perspectives and advice from Mary as a section hiker that I don't know how any section hiker could not read this book. And it's very well written. And actually, I just think both books are totally different. So talk to us a little bit about that, what you were thinking when you and I had that conversation.
I'm not sure I remember my thinking then. I wrote it I wrote it chronologically.
And I love that.
Because, and one of the things that I have not heard of anyone else doing, I don't know if I'm unique in it, but possibly, is that I did both the AT and the PCT together. So once I retired, I started before I retired, but once I retired, I planned on doing about 6 weeks on each trail each year. I hate summer, it's too hot. So one in the spring and one in the late summer, fall. And so I simply would pick the sections that were best at those times, which a section hiker has the opportunity to do. We don't have to go through the middle of Virginia when it's hot. We don't have to. Right. We don't have to do the roller coaster when it's horrid. We can do the roller coaster in the fall when it's beautiful. So that's how I came to do them both at the same time. And I simply picked out the section that I would do for, well, let's see, this year I think I'll do this. And I would plan it out.
And that's what you wanted to do. And that's going to lead me a little bit further here in the questioning. And one of the reasons that I do love this book is because section hikers can relate. I relate 100% to this because I've had a lot of people say to me as a section hiker, well, explain your hike to me. Where did you go first? And then I can remember maybe like the first couple years, but after that, it's like, oh, I went to New York, I went to Vermont, I went back down to Georgia, and I just went wherever I needed to go that year. That's why I relate to your book so much. Yes. So in my original question, that line of thinking was, yes, you went based on what was going on that year.
Yes. Now, some people would have preferred I wrote like a through hiker so they could read all about one trail in one fell swoop and then read all about another trail in one fell swoop. And it's not like that because that's not how I did
hiking. It. Yeah. And, to me, somebody that long distance hikes long distance trails and other section hikers listening to this, that's not section hiking. And as you said before, that's the beauty of it. That's the true beauty of it. So
I'm a long section hiker. Long before lash was ever invented as a word. But I'm not a through hiker. I have a life too.
Right. And we're going to get into that here shortly. I just love this book so much. This interview, I'm just going to be quoting stuff out of your book because it resonates so much. It's so deep as someone who spent years long distance hiking and section hiking a trail. And one of the things I liked a lot was one of your quotes from the book. You said, walking has blessed me with keeping me fit and active. An older person can't simply throw on a pack and start walking the trail. At least I wouldn't advise that tact. Talk to us, Mary. What is it like to start a long distance trail at 60 and not just one long distance trail, multiple long distance trails?
Well, you have to know what you can do and not compare yourself to what you used to be able to do. I suppose up until the time I was 40, I wasn't long distance hiking, but okay, if we're going to go on a little backpack, okay, I didn't prepare. Pretty much grabbed the pack and we went, and I probably had enough body strength that I could do it. I might pay for a little bit, but I could do it. I'm older. I'm 79 now.
I was going to ask you how I thought you were. I didn't know if you were 79 or 80. So you're 79.
No, I'm 79.
Right? Okay.
I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to long distance hike this year. COVID wiped out last year. I'm already walking. So I try to walk in my neighborhood at least, and I have a 2-mile route. When I start after I haven't been walking for a while, I start with a block.
Yeah.
But I try to be disciplined about it. Go for a block and back, which is really 2 blocks, 1 week. The next week it's add a block. So it's 4 blocks that I'm walking. Then I add another block, which is 2 blocks. So then it's 6 blocks I'm walking. And I kind of started in November getting back into it. And I'm up to 7 miles yesterday. But I work
Wow.
into it.
Yeah.
That's not with a pack, that's just walking. Walking is the best thing in the world for me, for my emotional, my mental attitude, I just, you walk and you get endorphins going, you feel better.
Right.
I have trouble getting out the door sometimes, but as soon as I get out the door, I'm so glad that I did. And I think that I am far healthier than my genes would have predicted I would be at 79. And it's because of walking.
Now, have you been a walker your whole life, even before you started doing the trails?
To some extent, yes. I certainly was a walker when I was young. There's a lot of life that goes on between the time I was in 4th grade and 79. I've been married and divorced twice. I have 2 children. I have 10 grandchildren. Those activities mean I wasn't always walking long distance trails.
It might have meant you were chasing
changed
grandchildren. Yeah.
I was a physical therapist. I changed careers. I became a pastor. There's a fair amount of education time wrapped up in both of those. But I've always liked to walk. Have I always kept in shape? Have I always walked? No. I don't remember exactly when, but it was in the last half of my working career. I know that. And I decided I was really getting in really pretty horrid shape. And I thought, I've got to get walking. I've got to get walking. It was the best decision I've made for years and years and years and years.
And you did. And another thing, what I'm getting ready to quote that you wrote in the first book is absolutely phenomenal. And I pause because it's something that I've been trying to formulate kind of in my own brain as a section hiker and someone who takes on a particular section of trail each year. And then while I'm hiking that trail, I think of another, the next year that I'm going to do. And I've never known how to say this. So I'm going to read what you wrote in your book. And I'm telling you right now, everybody, this totally sums up section hiking. And then I'm going to talk to Mary about this. So I'm going to read this first. You said, I'd become accustomed to taking long hikes every year. I was no longer taking a section hike. My mindset had changed. I'd become a regular long section hiker, a different mindset than a through hiker or a day hiker. I didn't take out 5 months to do an adventure of a lifetime. After finishing a hike, I started planning the next year's hike. Doing 300 to 400 miles on each trail each year was a doable yearly adventure, not a once in a lifetime opportunity. I didn't through hike and didn't consider having a complete lifestyle change, followed by a re entry into the non hiking world. And this is the best part, you guys. But I'd developed a lifestyle that included hiking 2 long sections of some trail each year, every year. So, Mary, did that I love that so much. Did that just formulate to you one day? Did it take a while to put all that together? Talk to us about those 5 sentences I just read.
Uh, well,
It's hard to talk about, I think, because it's hard to formulate. I've been trying to put this together in my own brain.
When I started, I was still working. I could free up 1 week or 2 weeks on each trail each year. Some people who read the book, one of the things they said is she must be really rich because she keeps flying back to the East Coast all the time. My daughter was on the East Coast. My family was there. So I'm going to go see my family. And while I'm there, I'm going to go hike. Tack that onto one end or the other.
Right.
So I got started on both trails and I thought, well, I'm going to retire. People talk about retirement goals. How about doing the AT and the PCT, by the time I'm 70? So I did. And it was just a matter of you can do an awful lot as a section hiker if you put those pieces together. And I'm kind of a goal-directed person, so I kind of like to complete what I say I'm going to complete, and I can organize. So it's like, okay, this year, how far should I go this year on this trail? Which piece should I try? It just grew that way. The phrase, though, you often hear on the trails is you're doing an adventure of a lifetime. I really don't like that phrase. That means I'd only have one adventure in a lifetime. I like to have adventures all the time.
I'm telling you, Mary, your book has really changed me in my thought process. And what you just said, only one adventure of a lifetime, that just doesn't seem right.
No, not at all. So, and I don't know, I can go all the way back to my parents for somehow instilling that in me somehow. I love adventure. There's a story that's not in the book yet, but might be in a book someday. But I'll just go ahead and tell you because it's, been rattling around my brain for a long time. When I was probably in first or second grade, there was some sort of big virus going through the United States at that point, and I was very sick. We even called the doctors made house calls in those days, but you had to be really sick before you would have a doctor do a house call because that cost money.
Right.
The doctor looked at me and examined me and said, well, I really don't know what to do with her, but I think we should put her in the hospital. The doctor left. I did a donkey kick in bed and said, I remember this clearly because my mother probably told the story about it 50 times. I remember my mother saying, I said, hooray, I'm going to the hospital. I'm going to have an adventure.
And it never stopped.
My mother claims I started to get well as soon as that happened.
There's something very true to that, Mary.
Our whole lives have innumerable adventures in front of us should we choose to take them.
And I just love that paragraph so much. I'm actually thinking about getting that blown up and hanging that in a frame. I just love that so much. It's just the section hiker, I don't want to call it a mantra, whatever, but it's just kind of really what I've been trying to say out loud to people. And you did it for me. So thank you, Mary.
Oh, thank you.
Now, there are some questions that I need to ask you that people will get mad. They'll write to me and say, why didn't you ask her this or this? And the first one is, why the Triple Crown? Did you decide you were going to do the Triple Crown before you started your, hiking the AT and the PCT, or did this just come about?
It just came about. I had no idea there was a Triple Crown. At the beginning, I thought, well, a retirement goal. The AT I had heard of somehow from the time I was a kid. There was a little book in a tiny, tiny little library that I read about the AT, so I knew it existed. Since I live in Washington, I had heard about the PCT through Washington. When I began, I thought I might get through the PCT in Washington. And I was going to visit my daughter, and why didn't we go try what this AT was about? I had no idea, none, about how this would all work out. I met a trail person who people in the West know, Nitro. I met her on the AT when she was pretty young and doing the AT. She now works for the Pacific Crest Trail Association. Maybe she has another job too, I don't know, but she does work for them. And I started following her trail journals. I didn't know about trail journals either. And the next year or so, I think she did the AT first and then the PCT and the CDT, but I'm not really sure. But I kept following hers, and it's like, whoa, this sounds cool. So it kind of just grew. And when I got through with the AT and the PCT, it's like, well, the CDT is what lots of hikers go on to the next time. Why don't I start that? By that time, I was 70, and I didn't know if I would be able to finish that. But I thought, well, I'm going to start it and act like I'm going to finish it, and we'll see what happens.
And you did clearly at 76, right?
And I did.
So act like no one's listening that's a hiker. And we might have people listening that aren't hikers, or they might want to get into hiking. And I know what people say in general about the AT, the PCT, and the CDT. You know, you hear the AT is the community trail, the PCT is the sexy trail, and the CDT is the hardest trail. So what would you say, Mary, for someone that has spent years on each trail? How would you describe each trail?
Well, I try not to compare them, for one thing, because everywhere I go, I want to see what gifts the trail will give me, whatever it is. And there will be gifts. I don't care where you are. The AT, in many ways, is the hardest trail because it is not, it was not created with horses in mind. Both the AT, the PCT and the CDT are trails that more than people who walk could be on. Horses don't have hands. So
that's a great way to put it.
Horses don't have hands, and on the AT, you need hands as well as feet in some places. There's more scrambling. And I don't think when many of the trails on the AT were first created, anyone knew about switchbacks. So many of them go straight up and straight down. That's not my preferred way. But so that's the AT. AT starts you on a mountain, ends you on a mountain, and tries to run you up and down every mountain in between they can find. The PCT has different challenges. It has desert, it has high mountains, it goes very high over Forester Pass. It has many different types of climate and terrain that you go through. You have to worry about water more in some areas. It's just different. The CDT has those same differences of the PCT, except it has even higher places to go over. And at least when I started, there were more choices about what exactly you would do. And it was a little more free form. And the particular route I took, especially in New Mexico, the beginning, it's the only trail I've ever been on where the cow paths were more pronounced than the trail and frequently led you astray. But they're simply different. You need more navigation skills on the CDT.
Than the other two, you would say?
Than the other two. The AT, you can get lost partly because the terrain is the same and boxed in. So you need to pay attention when you get off trail to tend to Mother Nature, because when you get back out, both directions might look the same. And there's a reason a lot of hikers end up with the trail named wrong way.
So Mary, let's talk about real quick, because again, there's some questions on here.
Sure.
I will definitely 100% get emails if I don't ask you about your gear. So are you a gear junkie, or are you like, hey, I'm just going hiking and gear is like, because some people, it's usually I find people are one way or the other. They're really
Right.
into their gear and their gear means everything, or their gear is secondary. So where's Mary?
My gear is one thing is important for an old person, and that's get as light as possible. There
Period.
are a variety of ways to do that. There are hikers who carry less than I do, partly because I'm a cold sleeper, so that means I have to carry a little more so I stay warmer. But I had no idea when I don't think the real lightweight equipment revolution hadn't quite, was just sort of barely beginning to happen when I started doing this at 60. The blessing for people who are older is lightweight equipment. So it's very important to me that it be light. That said, there's a lot of little lightweight companies. I have my choices and other people can have theirs, and it's not really.
I mean, gear is personal, really.
Yes,
I mean, it's very
It's very personal. People always want to know about gear, and they always want to know about food, and food is even worse. It's like,
yeah, food is,
it's whatever you want to choose to do and how much you want to choose to carry and what you compromises or desires you want. If you want to be a gourmet cook, you take different things than if you just want the lightest pack possible.
So are you carrying anything now in your current setup, if you were to go out and you were ready to go, that you did when you started at 60, or is everything completely different?
Well, I still have a tent. I still have a sleeping bag. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I still have a raincoat. They all just weigh a lot less than when I started. I also, when I started, took all kinds of things I didn't need to take, like the sun shower and extra books to read, and all kinds of crud. I had a wonderful
pretty
time
much,
with
Mary,
it all.
Yeah. You've evolved like the rest of us. Like I had friends that carried novels and we ended up tearing them up and putting them in the fire, and getting the fire started with it. So, I mean, that's the beauty of learning as you go. And I think now people, there's a lot of YouTubes and there's a lot of people out talking about gear, but you could get kind of oversaturated and not really know until you go out and do.
Right. You need something that works for you, that fits for you. The lighter, the better. Especially if you're older, the lighter, the better. And so I will make some compromises on some things because I want lightweight.
And what about your feet? Are you wearing like trail runners?
I learned to make trail runners all of my whole time up until 60 and plus. I wore boots, and I always had horrid blisters. That didn't stop me from hiking, but it wasn't much fun to have horrid blisters. I started reading about long distance hikers who wore trail runners. Complete game changer. Now that I'm old, my feet are more fragile. Age does make a difference. I'm more likely to break if I fall now. I have had to switch to Hoka's because they have the largest cushion on the bottom.
There you go. End of story.
Yeah. Well, I have had a stress fracture in my foot. And
I was going to ask you if you've had any injuries over the years.
Generally speaking, all my body parts falling apart did not really have to do with hiking, at least originally. But I do have, at this point, at 79, I have 2 knee replacements, 2 shoulder replacements.
Oh, wow. Double knee replacements?
Yeah. Well, actually, for Old Lady on the Trail, I only got one that, as part of the saga of the Triple Crown, I accumulated a knee replacement and 2 shoulder replacements. I have to laugh about the book. I say, this doesn't have any sex in it. It just has surgery.
All right, people, you heard it here. Nothing but section hiking and surgeries. Okay. So I need everybody to go on Mary's website. Is that where you want them to go and get the book? Where should they get the book? Let's talk about that.
They can get the book. It's put out by Amazon. So I would just say, just go to Amazon.
Amazon, Old Lady on the Trail, Triple Crown at 76. We're going to leave that at that. And then we got to get on to this second book, Mary, because, well, first of all, congratulations on the Triple Crown.
Thank you.
I do think you are in a very low number of people that were simultaneously, I don't even know, less than 5. If there are 5 people that simultaneously section hiked AT and PCT and then completed the CDT. So congratulations on that. Well done. You are my hero and a lot of people's hero because you started this at 60. So we will leave that with that book. Your second book, the title, it's titled, Aren't You Afraid? And that's kind of a recurring theme in the book. And this book is based around, I don't want to call it a newer trail because I've heard of it before, but it's the American Discovery Trail that goes across the entire United States. So why the American Discovery Trail?
Well, why did I start that? Well, I started that because I ran out of things that I could do early in the spring on the CDT. So all I had left was stuff I had to finish later in the year because of snow. And I just had a shoulder replacement, and I didn't feel like working too hard. Didn't want to work too hard. I didn't want to carry heavy water. And I looked for a flat place to go hiking, and I had read Boston and Cubby's trail journals. I thought, I'll just go from a point in Ohio to the Mississippi River. That sounded flat.
Okay, so the American Discovery Trail.
That's why I started it.
I have a feeling it wasn't flat. I grew up in Ohio.
Not entirely.
Yeah, and so the American Discovery Trail officially starts where?
It officially starts at Cape Henlopen, Delaware.
And goes to on the West Coast?
Point Reyes, north of San Francisco.
And it's a very different trail because it's a lot of roads. There's no shelters. There's no you got to do route finding, I'm assuming. And getting back to that theme in the book, Aren't You Afraid? I love this. I keep saying I love this so much, but I really do. Because as a female hiker, hiking alone, relying on strangers, going up and knocking on people's doors, that's what this trail's about.
At least it was for me. Everybody who does it doesn't do it quite the same way. But if you take a look at the geography of the United States, you do not have a mountain range that goes from coast to coast. So, most of the
So why
land,
the title of that book, Aren't You Afraid?
It's what everybody kept asking me. Aren't you afraid? So I plan my hikes by what I think I can do in a day. So it's planned strictly by mileage. And for the American Discovery Trail, it is a waymarked trail. It is not necessarily a signed trail. So you follow the waypoints that you have, and the instructions on the turn by turn simply say, go down here, turn left. When you hit this waypoint, turn right. When you hit this waypoint, cross the park, find a trail, go straight. So that's what you have to go on. So I never know exactly what it will be like when I get to the end of my mileage for the day. And if you look at the United States, you can tell that almost all of the land in the middle is private property. It's not wilderness. So I go knock on the door. Hi, my name is Mary Davison. I am walking across the United States on the American Discovery Trail. You probably never heard about it, but it goes right by your house. And I'm really tired now, and I have to find a place to put my tent. May I put my tent up in your yard, please? And people will say, what? And the next question is probably, are you alone? And the third question is, aren't you afraid? And I met so many wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people. And I decided I have to write a book that says about there's all these wonderful people, because I'm doing what people think you should be afraid to do. And yet I have met so many wonderful people, and that's what the book is about.
And I got to tell you, as I was reading the very first book about hiking that I read, my dad actually had the book. It was A Walk Across America. And as I was reading, Mary's smiling, as I was reading your book, Aren't You Afraid? What a that book is, I don't know, 40 years apart. And what a contrast from the gentleman, who wrote and walked across America versus Mary writing Aren't You Afraid and walking across America. I mean, unbelievable. You're doing the same thing 40 years apart, and Mary is still, or 50 years apart, maybe. Peter Jenkins, Walk Across America. And Mary is still, people are still asking you, aren't you afraid? It's still an uncommon thing. And I recommend everybody reading this and reading Walk Across America as well. So, wow. And just that recurrent theme through the book is amazing. And it makes me sad at the same time. And it makes me sad that people don't know a trail goes by their house. And there's no trail angels out there like there are on the AT, and there's no like expected community. It's almost like you walked to Nebraska and created your own community.
Yes, but I found wonderful people everywhere I went. And I do think that people are afraid of other people they don't know. And I think that's a very sad thing. So part of why I wrote this book was to counter that. Nobody knows me. Nobody knows me. I just walk, they don't know me till I knock on a door. And yet on this trail, I have to ask for a place to put my tent much of the time. I have to ask for water. One of the biggest challenges on this trail is how do you take care of Mother Nature calls? And I say a lot in there. My daughter would say I put way too much information in there, but
oh no, I think it's perfect.
Oh, well. It's a big deal. We are all human animals. We all have to do stuff.
Right, exactly.
And I met so many wonderful people, and it also got me very interested in, you will see if you read the book, in the different ethnicities and colors of people in this country. And they're all wonderful. I mean, there are some unwonderful people in the world. I met a couple. But if I had been afraid of those, or if my fear had stopped me, think of all I would have missed. And I do think that we can make choices about what we choose to fear. And fear is not all bad. But we make choices in our lives. And I don't like seeing that we tend to make choices to fear more and more and more. And I think it is entirely possible to take a good look at things and decide what you would like to leave behind in your fears. And I think you can. So I thought it was important to say that.
And you guys, again, go to Amazon and get that book, Aren't You Afraid? Because honestly, listening to Mary, I mean, there is more and more in this book. And I can't think of a much better way to kind of wind this down. So you mentioned earlier at the beginning of the podcast that COVID kind of curtailed your plans for 2020. And I know here we are at the first of the year, 2021. Do you have some plans in mind you want to share with us?
Well, I had all my plans ready for last year. Whether the first part is still iffy. I obviously need to get a vaccine, and so do a whole lot of people. My spring hike planned for last year was to walk most of the way across Nebraska. Will I? It's my plan for this year, but it's still somewhat iffy at this point. I would be doing that probably in the very last of April and all of May, possibly. That's a plan. It doesn't know that it will happen right now.
One thing I failed to ask, how many miles across the country is the American Discovery Trail?
I would have to look it up, and then you would have to correlate whether you're including the northern route and the southern route both. So I don't know, 4,000 something.
Okay, so 4,000 miles. How many do you think you have? How many do you have done?
Oh, I've done more than 2 at this point, because I've done a little bit in the West also. I've done 2/3 of Colorado. I've done a little bit in Utah. I've done 140 miles in Nevada. So I've done some of that. So my late summer fall hike, probably mostly October, late September and October, would be to do a pretty big chunk of Utah. Do I have plans? Sure, I have plans. I can't tell you how they will go.
No, I don't think any of us can right now, but I can't wait to hear about it. And thank you so much for coming on the Little Old Jester Section Hiker podcast and talking to all of us section hikers about
I'm happy to do that.
about your section hiking journey. It is all possible. Get out there and get on the trails, people. Make your adventures happen. It's not one adventure of a lifetime. It's more than that. And I'm going to turn it over to Mary to sign off for us, where she is going to read one of her wonderful books and inspire us all to keep hiking section by section. Whenever you're ready, Mary.
Okay. I'm going to read the very last chapter, which isn't it's only a page and a half, out of Old Lady on the Trail. And the little intro in that chapter is a quote from a hiker I met in Colorado on the CDT, and we occasionally on my trail journals leave little notes to each other. And he said, Medicare pastor, when people suggest that I'm getting too old to through hike, I mention you. They don't argue after that. So he said that in well, it's supposed to say 2015. It's a misprint in the book. It says 1015. That's pretty bad. I just saw that. If you are an older hiker, you are not finished unless you or your body truly says you are. And it's perfectly all right to say so. No one has to hike. But if you wish to extend joys and challenges of the trail, and your body agrees, get some lightweight equipment to extend your hiking life. Do not compare yourself negatively with younger, more able hikers. You are the person you are now. And at any age, you are probably capable of more than you realize. If you're in your 70s, you won't hike the same way you did in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or even 60s. Still, a guy named Cimarron hiked most of the AT in his 90s in 2013. He wasn't the hiker he had been in his younger years, but he was on the trail. Billy Goat, 4 years my senior, still walks long trails, though he has had heart bypass surgery. He too walks differently than he did in younger years. Perhaps you can too. My friend Grapevine Kate and I took a walk around Deep Lake near Enumclaw several months ago. This was written a couple years ago. It wasn't a long walk, but it went through a small patch of forest wilderness around a lake. We met another walker who shared with us her recovery from severe injuries sustained in an automobile accident. That she could walk at all was a miracle. But by dint of the marvels of medicine, plus determination and effort on her part, she was on a hike. Her son had told her, Deep Lake couldn't be called a real hike. We emphatically contradicted her son. Of course it was a hike. It was the perfect hike for her. It was the perfect hike for my friend Kathy, too. She now has extensive back fusions and knees that complain. Her dog carries what she needs for a day hike. And while she can walk at all, she loves to be out in woods and mountains, and I love walking with her. It was a hike for us. Find a hike that fits your abilities and interests. Get outdoors. See the beauty around you. Walk in whatever way you can. There will come a time for each of us when we can no longer walk. Walk while you can. I am still able to get up and down from the ground. That means I can still get in and out of a tent. I am blessed to be able to walk at 76. I'll add, I'm blessed to be able to walk at 79. But here the story of the Triple Crown ends. I need to plan my next long-distance hike. Then I put another quote from Transient down there. Medicare pastor, keep on going until you find the edge of the earth. It is out there somewhere next to the horizon. Go have a happy hike, folks. Enjoy what you can.
Thank you, Mary. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate being on the podcast. Thank you.
What an inspiration Mary is. I think we can all take a cue from Mary and think of our section hiking trips as several life adventures and not once-in-a-lifetime events. I do hope that each of you will consider getting a copy of Mary's books, Old Lady on the Trail or Aren't You Afraid? Mary also wanted me to let all of you know that the proceeds from Old Lady on the Trail are split to where the AT, PCT, and CDT receive 10% each, and the church receives 10%. And 10% of the proceeds from her book, Aren't You Afraid?, go to the American Discovery Trail. All of the information, resources, and pictures from today's episode can be found in the show notes at hikingradionetwork.com. If you like what we do here at the network, please consider a donation to your favorite show and leave us a review. Each donation and review truly makes a difference. Thanks for listening, everybody, and happy section hiking.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way. If you ever get lost, or if the trail leads you astray, the music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets in these neighborhoods, head over the river